Hello, everyone. I'm Troy Evans, a member of UDN PEER. And as many of you know, UDN PEER likes to highlight the sites within the UDN. And one of the many great things I get to do as a member of PEER is to get to know a lot of these people. Today is one of those very special days for me. PEER has asked to highlight the clinical site at the University of Utah in Salt Lake City. And I have the opportunity to live not far from there, about 20 minutes south of the clinical site. And so this one's especially special to me. I have with me today Dr. Lorenzo Botto, the Principal Investigator of the UDN site in Utah. Dr. Botto, thank you for joining and for participating in this highlight for UDN PEER.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. It's a pleasure.
Good, good. To start off with, would you mind telling us what your work was like prior to the UDN and prior to the inclusion of the Utah site to the network?
Sure. It was a work probably similar to many other clinicians. I'm a clinical and biochemical geneticist by formation with interest and training also in epidemiology and public health. And so I was running or helping run a number of clinics here at the University of Utah, also involved in a number of epidemiologic and public health studies to try and assess what's going on population-wide with some of these conditions.
What was the, oh, go ahead. What was the process like of joining the clinical site to the UDN? Had you heard about it prior? Was it something that you'd kind of known about for a while?
It was, and in fact, the UDN probably was the engine that made a lot of things happen in the last few years. And I'm specifically referring to the development of the what we call the Penelope Undiagnosed and Rare Disease Program. We had heard about the UDN a few years back during the first version, if you will, of the UDN. We were not part of that, but our leader in the Department of Pediatrics thought that that this sort of work really got at a critical need in the community. The community of people with undiagnosed and rare conditions wasn't one that was well served. The idea was that, current healthcare systems do quite well with sort of common conditions, if you will, and one can think of what common is, but for people with rare or even new conditions or with atypical presentations, we call them, something that you don't see very often, then that the system that we have really doesn't manage to help these families as much as it should. That's not because we don't want to, or in principle we can't. It's just the typical process of diagnostic evaluation does not work well. As you know, the typical process is you see your primary care provider. If she or he doesn't figure it out, you go to a specialist, and if not to another specialist, you get hospitalized, and it's sort of a thing after the other. And it's sort of what we call a sequential approach with time between and testing that sometimes can be redundant. And if something is simple, you get to, let's call it a solution or the diagnosis pretty quickly. But if something is new or unusual, that process, that journey can become what many families call an odyssey, a true odyssey that can last years, be painful and expensive. And so the vision, that's the vision of the UDN, is that, and of our department chair at the time, and of the system through these years, has been, let's change the system and do something that's really centered to solve these, what they call, medical mysteries in a different way. And a different way, as you know, is a team-based approach that brings in at the same time a number of specialists with various skills, data, and genomics, and the clinical, and this specialty and that specialty. Let's put everybody in the same room with their brains focused on the same person, on the same family, and let's get things done quickly, efficiently, and let's get to the needle in the haystack as quickly as possible as a basis for doing a better job for care and management.
Yeah.
So that's where we started with Penelope, and we built a community, and then an opportunity came to be part of the UDN. We sort of pounced on it, and we were fortunate to be selected among the clinical sites, and the rest is history, as they say.
I first heard of the Penelope project that you spoke about through a promotional video. I believe it was titled 1 in a Million. For anyone that hasn't seen it, it's easy to find on YouTube or Googling 1 in a Million and the Penelope project. But it's a phenomenal video that talks about the diagnostic odyssey, like you mentioned, and what the project does. When did the Penelope project start?
So we started at the end of 2015, and we started seeing families basically in 2016. The development was interesting. I mean, we wanted to get it right, or try to get as close as possible right. So we did something that I think was very useful. We started by listening. We started by developing focus groups, 3 different ones, one for families, just for families, to hear what their experience was, what their suggestions were, which were the gaps, which were the challenges they encountered, and how they would like to see something like this happening. So that was one. The second was with what we call mid-level providers. These are the people like the nurses, nurse practitioners, clinic coordinators, the people who are the interface between families and the clinicians, and they hear a lot of stories. They're really experts in sort of the mechanics of what works and doesn't work. So we wanted to hear from them, what can we do to make this as efficient with fewer steps as possible. And then the third group was that of clinicians and specialists. This doesn't come out too often, but we want the same thing. We want to get it right. We want to be partners of the family and share in their successes. And families are frustrated when this doesn't happen, but we are frustrated as well. So we wanted to hear their side of the story. So we collected all of this information, the issues, the suggestions, and we tried to develop a process that took all of that into account. And that's why it took several months to think through it, but then we started off. And the family that's depicted in 1 in a Million was one of the first that came through our program, and for us it was an eye-opener.
Yeah. So what I found interesting among many of the sites, and you're a perfect example of this, there's a long-standing history of working in this rare and undiagnosed space that started prior to joining the UDN network. I know as a participant myself, we're the hard cases. We're the hardest of the hard, the rarest of the rare. As a specialist and a principal investigator, what keeps you going on that? What keeps you motivated and through the difficulties of a wide range of symptoms and a wide range of ages and participants in this arena?
Well, I think a couple of things. One thing that we really like, and many people like, is sort of this. what I could call like the sense of community, associated with with this work. As you know, you are a champion and a testimonial of this. If somebody has, let's call it a named condition, it's easier to find, the patient group, the family group, the Facebook group, the website that's specific for that condition, for that gene, or for that presentation. When one is undiagnosed, there is often the sense of sometimes a sense of solitude and isolation that comes with not easily finding a community that shares the experience, right? And but so this is changing. As you know, there are strong and powerful communities now with people with undiagnosed conditions. And that sense of community that started out really with the families and with the patient has come now to encompass also us on the sort of on that side of the barricades, if you will. And this community has a strong voice, and it really helps us and supports us and empowers us to move forward. So that is, I think, a real key and support. The other thing, in speaking with the other clinicians and bioinformaticians and molecular geneticists and nurses who work with us, there is it's really powerful and in some way, really beautiful to work together as a team. We learn from each other. I like to call this a learning community. What you call, difficult cases, really, as in with many things in life, it is the challenge that brings the best out of people, right? And so this brings the best out of clinicians. It's not what they see every day in clinic necessarily. So we learn from each other every day through this experience. And so this combination of being able, hopefully, to help families, as well as being at the forefront of discovery in science, is really what makes this a unique experience. And if you add sort of this sense of community as being part of a thing larger than ourselves, I think these are all things that make the everyday work something that we are really lucky to be part of.
So many of us have exhausted so many resources along this undiagnosed journey, and many, I think, gain such a close relationship with his or her general physician or a specialist or something like that. And we're so appreciative of people like you that are tackling this task on our behalf, because it takes bright minds like yourself that are willing to push through a lot of those difficulties. You mentioned some of the advancements of technology that you're in a way on the forefront of. Where would you say the last, let's call it 10 years, how would you describe the advancements of the last 10 years? And do you see anything on the horizon that will continue to improve the diagnostic tools and odysseys for many of us?
Oh, I think if someone was around 10 years ago and skipped those 10 years and now was able to come to where we are now, would not recognize the field at all. I mean, there's been so many changes, changes for the better. And I would say, different kinds of changes. I mean, you have alluded to an important set of changes, which are the technological changes, the ability to scan genes in ways that were basically unthinkable 10 or 15 years ago. Not only scan the genes, but go more deeply into what these genes do through something called RNA sequencing, sort of bridging the gap between what DNA is, which is a code book, and what DNA actually is able to perform, to do, which is to be the code book for things that come after it. There are technologies that are able to look at single cells. We can now use model organism and functional studies to see what these genes actually do. And what I say, and what I say also to the fellows and young faculty, is that genes are just the starting point. I mean, I don't care who discovers gene A or gene B, for me, the real important thing is what we're able to do once we know the genes. What are those genes actually doing? What proteins are they making? What pathways are they coding for? What happens between genes and what we call phenotype, between genes and the body, because that's where we can act, right? I mean, that's where we can try and find things that are able to tweak that enzyme or tweak that mechanism and make things better. So 10 years ago, we were barely scratching the surface of what a gene was, and we've changed it, and now we're not only completing the picture of all of the genes, but we're getting into the really important chunk of business, which is what happens if the gene is not coded in the exact right way, and then how we can intervene. So 10 years have passed, and now we are moving, if you will, from just diagnostics to sort of the whole path from genes to mechanisms through targets, where we can try and change what we call the natural history, find things that work to tweak things and make things better. That to me is the exciting part. And that's where I think the field will be going. I think in 10 years, maybe even in 5, everyone perhaps should have a credit card size thing in which one has one's own genome there and the clinical health information. And that will not be the end of years of study. That will be something that one can get perhaps at the beginning of all of this. It would be the starting point, not the end point.
In some ways, I feel fortunate of being a participant because I've seen some of those firsthand advancements that you're talking about. The genetic testing that was available 10 years ago, the cost and the time and resources it took to complete that compared to now is drastically different. So I know we're all excited for what the future holds. I think it could be really exciting. When you're working with these technological advancements and you're working with the rare and undiagnosed community, I'm curious how you describe your work to your colleagues and your peers, how it's received when you're talking to somebody that might have a specific specialty in as a surgeon or as a different type of clinical specialist. How does that kind of a conversation go when you're talking about seeing multiple types of cases within a given time frame?
Yeah, I think, for us in clinical geneticists is maybe a little different from other specialties. Like we in clinical genetics see different things all the time because we deal with rare conditions. And as you know well, rare diseases is a little bit of a misnomer, right? I mean, they are individually rare, but collectively they are pretty frequent. So every day in a genetics clinic, you essentially never see the same thing. in the same day. I just walked out from my morning clinic. I saw 5 different families, 5 completely things. One genetics of the bone, another had a mitochondrial condition, a third had something else, a fourth was completely unknown, and so on and so forth. Many of my colleagues, by their specialty, tend to be sort of more organ specific, right? So the cardiologist obviously is focusing on the heart, knows everything about the heart, but that's what they mostly see. Orthopedic surgeon is focused on the bones. Some are just focused on certain bones, and others on other bones. So what I think they like about things like the UDN is actually being part of a team and seeing sort of seeing new things and seeing new things as a team, as sort of clinicians and the physicians and specialists. We like learning, and we like helping, and the UDN, I think, helps us learn more, helps us help, and helps us discover things. So these 3 things can be achieved, I think, quite well in an environment like the UDN. So I think, and just to build on what you have said, I mean, one of the really nice things when I speak to other colleagues that are part of the UDN team, some of them say, this is the best thing that happened to me in the last 10 years, because now we can work with others, and we can solve things there and then, because we sit in the same room, and we can exchange ideas and make plans and make things work faster, rather than the old way we talked about before.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I wanted to shift gears for just a quick moment, because you've been a long supporter, as we've discussed, of the entire rare disease community, but you've also been a strong supporter of the patient-led groups, and you talked about some of those a minute ago. In 2019, I believe it was, you teamed up with Nord and Run, and you participated in Running for Rare in the 2019 Boston Marathon. Have you always been a runner, Dr. Botto?
No, actually, it's an interesting story. It was the there you go. It was the Penelope program and the connection with the community of rare and undiagnosed conditions that led me on the road towards running. And here we see Gina Zainik and her daughter. Gina is the leader of the Rare and Undiagnosed network here in Utah, and it was sort of to promote rare and undiagnosed diseases and the community that I put my first pair of running shoes on back in the spring of 2018. So I went from couch to a half marathon. This was a Salt Lake City half marathon in about 5 weeks, and I'm there with Gina's a daughter and my daughter there. And this was at the end. So the good news is that I actually survived that. And the previous photograph you showed was the same group together with also the family of say Marley, who's there, the child on the forefront, and and her parents, let's say Steve Eliasson. And I want to spend a minute on that story because Steve and his wife and Marley came through the Penelope program. There is, some of the few we were able to diagnose Marley with a rare condition, which put them into contact then with the clinical trials for kids with her rare condition. But one important thing is that Steve became a champion, like Gina, for the rare and undiagnosed community. And Steve is also a state representative in the Utah legislature, and together with Tyler and Tyler's mom, the protagonist of 1 in a Million, they teamed up and they were able to pass a bill in the Utah legislature to help cover advanced genetic testing for kids with undiagnosed condition. So I think this shows the power of Gina and Ran and Steve and the Penelope program to bring together the community and make real changes into what happens to the rare and undiagnosed community very practically in our community. So yeah, thanks for sharing there. And then after that, I just kept going. I'm the Boston Marathon. I always say is the real culprit there is Paul Mazur. He's as you know, a key member of the UDN at the coordinating center. He's an tireless champion of the community. Yes. And knowing that I started running for this community, he put me in contact with Nord, and that's a marathon I ran with a wristband for Run, the Utah community, and a wristband, for North, trying to raise awareness. And in about 2 weeks, I will be running my 10th marathon.
Really?
With the same purpose that I had, three now, nearly 4 years ago, to raise the profile of the rare and undiagnosed community by teaming up with these great organizations.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I'll stop sharing that now. Well, this has been delightful. We sure appreciate all of the support that you give to all of us as participants, and for your participation in the UDN, and for all of the support of UDN PEER. We greatly thank you, and we're appreciative of everything. Do you have any final comments or anything last you'd like to say to any participants or the families of participants?
Well, I think finishing, just to say very briefly, it's a number one. This is really a team effort. There's a lot of things that happen behind closed doors to try and support this. I know that PEER is doing the utmost to continue making the UDN a nationwide resource, not only to make it live, but to make it grow into something more. And we have a lot of organizations with the same goals, local as well as national. And you mentioned say Nord, and there are many others. So I think we have to thank you if this continues to grow and to be a sustainable resource. It is the work not only of us, but I think especially of the community. You have a much stronger voice than we have to make things happen on a national level. The second and last thing I like to say is that we feed off your hope and your strength, and I really mean this. We are not surprised, but we are strengthened by the hope that you have, the realism that you have in continuing to go through this this journey. As you know, there is a danger with hype. Genetics has a way of generating hype. We found this gene. Sometimes it seems that everything is solved, or that tomorrow we'll have a cure. That's not true. In many cases, it is a step forward, and as the metaphor of the marathon teaches us, there are a lot of steps that need to be taken in order to move from discovery to sort of actionable things and treatments and cures. And I think we learn every day from the community to really balance hype with hope, right? The new discovery with being realistic with both feet on the ground, but that is not discouraging. That's being practical and realistic, and know how to face challenges day after day after day. And I think that keeps us all moving forward. Understand that we're here for the long game, and for if you pardon my pun, for the long run.
That's a well-timed and well-placed pun. Great advice. Great talking to you. Always been a pleasure to talk to you and to everyone with your staff at the University of Utah UDN site. So we thank you. We appreciate all the work you're doing, and we certainly hope that continues.
Yeah, so thank you very much. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.